I just feel like I've been around the block, ripping up fantasy stock, working around the clock. Look at the view from the top. Researching rookies a lot? No, I just be listening to pods, yeah. One in particular, I'm just a messenger, let me just pass on the rock. Browning, brunning, pruning, pronouncing ain't what he's doing. What he's doing is not losing, but infusing you with new things. And there's Dennis the Bennett, yeah. The man is a menace, yeah. Building a dynasty, some of the finest things. Promise you, you won't regret it. Sly as a fox, cultured in pop. Give him his props. Here is a thought, here is a box. And you cannot compare them at all, so don't even try. Careful with the news, but when you use a take, I take up Tony Fire. I mean Dyer, because anyone else is a huge mistake. Whoa, fantasy round table, fantasy round table. Yeah. Fantasy round table, come take a look at the crown, baby. Hey, fantasy round table, fantasy round table. Woo. Fantasy round table, come take a look at the crown, baby. Go.
Hello and welcome to the Halloween edition of the Fantasy Football Roundtable podcast. It's just like a normal podcast, except for we look scarier today, I think.
Ooh.
You ready for All Hallows Eve, Dennis? You got your candy ready?
We don't get trick-or-treaters where I live, kind of on a country road. We actually took the boy, dropped him off at a neighborhood with one of his friends. We're going to pick him up later. Big Shorty, he doesn't trick-or-treat anymore. He's 17 years old. I've been waiting 17 years for this day.
You know, I always get kind of excited when Halloween falls on a Monday because one of the most memorable football games I think I ever watched growing up was on a Halloween night. It was the Packers and the Bears, and it was in Soldier Field, and there was this hideous storm. And they basically, it was when Favre was still playing, they basically played the entire game like in the same 20-yard span because you couldn't really punt, you couldn't throw. I just remember sitting at home being fascinated by that, and then I moved someplace where we get that weather and it's less fascinating.
Right. When it pops up every year at the same time for about 6 months, it's like, hey, this is not a novelty.
No, it was California me. Well, we are going to take a look at what was another wild week in the NFL leading up to tonight's Monday night game, which is the Cincinnati Bengals minus Jamar Chase battling the Cleveland Browns minus any sense of hope. But what else is new for Cleveland? The first game was live from London, the third and final London game of the year, and boy, was it a barn burner. We sent the 2-5 Denver Broncos to face the 2-5 Jacksonville Jaguars, and you know what? The Broncos are 3-5. 21-17 victors. Take that, Jacksonville. Jerry Jeudy had another big game, Dennis. Is he starting to become the go-to receiver for the Broncos, or might he end up for another team?
Well, the last time that this happened, it seemed like the Broncos came out and force-fed Cortland Sutton the ball. So this was like after week 2 or something, week 3. Then they came out and they peppered him with targets. Unfortunately, this time, he's had a couple games in this stretch where he's still getting a good target volume. He just hasn't been converting. Yesterday, he didn't get a lot of targets. What did he have? Just 4. But I think he had 9 targets last week, and 3 weeks ago or 4 weeks ago, he had something like 11.
Jeudy had 7 targets. He led the team. He got 6 for 63.
Yeah, so it hasn't been I was talking about Sutton.
Oh, Sutton. Yeah, he had 4.
Yeah, but the last time that we were in this situation, it's like they came out and force-fed Sutton the ball, it seemed like. So if I'm a Jeudy manager, I'm wondering, are they going to try that again? But over the last 4 weeks, let's see, Judy's wide receiver 21 and Sutton is wide receiver 67. And Sutton has had a couple games in that stretch with either close to double-digit or double-digit targets. And so he's not converting, whereas Jeudy is. Now, granted, one of those high-volume games for Jeudy was with Brett Rippon. But I do think it's concerning because it would seem like Sutton has he's got a skill set that would seem suited for what Russ does. And Jeudy seems to be the one converting. So right now, going into next week, I'm more comfortable starting Judy and then waiting to see what happens with Sutton.
Yeah, I think there's two things potentially at play. Judy has been rumored to be on the market, so I get worried that they were trying to pump him up. But also, so in week 5, Sutton did get 11 targets, caught 5 for 74. That was that shit show game against the Colts where I don't think Russell's ball was very good. But after that, against the Chargers, he had J.C. Jackson all day, and against the Jets, he was covered by Sauce Gardner all day. So Sutton has been drawing kind of the number one, and I think that has opened up a little more for Judy. I'll be curious to see what happens when, say, they come out of the bye and play Tennessee that doesn't exactly have a shutdown corner, because we saw that a little bit with even when they played that game against the 49ers were kind of locking down and smothering him a little bit. But they play Tennessee, the Jets, and Carolina Panthers the next 3 weeks out of a bye to end November. I would think that it will be more interesting to see what the split is. If Judy's still there, because there's still a possibility. Judy and Chubb seem to be the two Broncos that are most likely to get traded.
They're the guys people want.
Yeah. On the flip side, Travis Etienne, first game with James Robinson gone, got 24 carries, made the most of it, 156 yards and a touchdown. He also saw 3 targets, caught all 3, but for only 6 yards. Do you think he's going to continue to see this kind of a workload, and can he hold up under it?
Well, he's not a little guy. He's 6 foot and 215 or so. So he's got the size to be able to handle it. And for me, it comes down to what kind of blocking is he getting, because he doesn't have terrific vision. And so he has to have a good hole. The Jags cleared the runway for him. I expect we're going to have a couple games where he lays an egg. He has, 35 yards rushing and catches a couple passes. But by and large, I don't think that Jermichael Hasty and Snoop Connor present an awful lot of obstacle to him dominating the running back touches. I like where he's at and what he did last week. Let's see. He is running back 6 on the week right now. So he's, they asked and he delivered. Unfortunately, the rest of the team couldn't deliver around him.
Yeah, although they did have a lead going into the fourth quarter, and surprisingly, Denver remembered what offensive football is. In a game that was much more exciting and high-paced, the Carolina Panthers traveled to battle the Atlanta Falcons. Falcons held serve and won 37-34 to take sole possession of the AFC South at 4-4, just like we all expected after 8 weeks. On Carolina side, Donta Foreman got to carry the load, 26 carries, 118 yards, and 3 touchdowns. Dennis, he's looking pretty good. Is he maybe a better fit for the scheme they want to run? Do you like him moving forward?
They like Hubbard. They drafted Hubbard. They gave him some opportunity last year, and while he didn't deliver earth-shattering numbers, he was solid most games as far as production went. Hubbard has a little more explosion than Foreman, but Foreman he's a big dude, and he runs with power. He has some speed. He can catch the ball. So I'll be curious to see if when Hubbard comes back, do they try to work him in a little more? Foreman had a 74% touch rate in week 8, but with Hubbard available in week 7, his touch rate was only 58%. So, that's a fairly significant increase. And I don't know if that'll hold. I feel like it's going to dip back down closer to 60 when Hubbard gets back, just because, Hubbard is better than Spencer Brown and Raheem Blackshear, I do believe.
Yeah, and this is 2 good games where Foreman's gone over 100 yards in a row. There might be something about him being more of a straightforward plotter that has made him better for Ben McAdoo's system. I don't know. On the flip side, Dennis, the Falcons, I mentioned, going to first place now in the NFC South. They're 4-4. They don't exactly have a blistering second half schedule. They have the Chargers and they have the Ravens on that schedule, but They have 3 division games, then Steelers, Commanders, Bears, and Cardinals among their opponents. Could this team, we thought the Falcons might be one of the worst teams in the NFL. Could they actually be a playoff team?
I mean, somebody's got to win this division, don't they?
Remains to be seen, but I suppose
somebody's getting in and vying for the one and done from the NFC South. I think it's going to be the Buccaneers. But they did air it out. I mean, Mariota threw the ball 28 times. So, that's something. The running game was a little bit peculiar. Huntley had 16 carries. He led the team in carries, put up 91 yards. Algier had an okay game of 14 for 39. But I just think that the team isn't – it's got deficiencies in a lot of spots. I mean, they've got 2 great players in Drake London and Kyle Pitts.
If they remember, they're on the team.
London had, 5 targets? Pitts had 9 targets this week. So, they're getting there. I mean, they've got to be more consistent in throwing the ball. You can't throw the ball 20 times and expect to who was it? I think it was Luke Sawhook tweeted today that it wasn't DJ Moore. It was, I think, Darnell Mooney and somebody else had lead the NFL in target share. I think it might have been I don't think it was Atlanta, because maybe
it could be London. He was getting a ton of targets early in the season.
But he said Luke said something to the effect of that it was one of the least valuable stats, because here's the 2 guys that lead in target share, but they're on like the 2 lowest volume passing offenses in the NFL. And so it really didn't amount to anything. It was a good point. I think to me, target share is a number that you have to put it in context. And if it's a super low volume, like 20 passes a game, having a 30 or 40% target share doesn't mean quite the same as a 25% target share at 40 attempts a game. But I don't know that they're going to play Ritter. But Mariota is, honestly, to me, I was a big supporter of him getting another opportunity. I felt like he kind of had earned it, but he just isn't delivering, to be honest. And whether that's the game plan that they're running, or, I mean, he's putting up decent enough fantasy stats because of the running, but he's not delivering for the rest of the team. And maybe Cordero Patterson being out is part of the issue. For all the things we want to say about Cordero, he put up great numbers last year, and that was with Matt Ryan. But this year, he's still a good player, and he does the things he does really well. It'll be interesting to see when Patterson gets back if this offense ticks up a notch.
Yeah, I think Mariota's been fine. I don't think they're going to pull him. I agree with you. Part of me just thinks it's going to come down to that Week 18 game where it's the Buccaneers and the Falcons, and one of those teams is going to the playoffs and one of them isn't.
Let's see what Mariota is on the year. Let me update real quick. Oh, he's QB8 on the year.
Well, he's been running and doing everything. Atlanta's one of those teams that's competitive, and they're good in NFL terms, but they've been such a dicey proposition for fantasy. Speaking of sometimes dicey propositions for fantasy and those target share leaders, the Chicago Bears traveled to Dallas and lost 49-29. Dennis, I feel like we've talked about this before, but David Montgomery, 15 carries, 53 yards, 3.5 yards per carry. Khalil Herbert, 16 carries, 99 yards, a touchdown, had a 36-yard run. Seems to give them a lot better pop on offense. Is it time for him to start getting more carries as the David Montgomery era coming to an end?
Well, I don't expect Montgomery to get re-signed. There's talk that Montgomery, now that Roquan Smith has been traded, Robert Quinn has been traded, that the Bears are looking to move David Montgomery. So I think Montgomery is a good enough back. If he goes to a good team that needs a running back, I think he could put up some decent numbers. He'd be good in Arizona. You know, they need a reliable running back.
James Conner ain't it.
And Montgomery is typically healthy. He can catch the ball, good in the passing game when it comes to protection. And, you know, he's got good awareness and good feet. He just doesn't have flat out speed. And so he's good at what he does. And I don't know if Cliff would pull a move like that, but I saw somebody saying something about sending him to Philadelphia. You don't need to send him to Philly. You got Miles Sanders there.
Well, that would add to our. Remember, we talked about are all those three of those backs going to just shuffle around Josh Jacob? But
yeah,
on the
I do think that it's probably time to give Herbert a little more run. I mean, it was a fairly even split. I think Montgomery had 18 touches. Herbert had 16. Depends on what Herbert can do in the passing game, because he didn't get a target yesterday, but he is currently the better runner. He's breaking off those big runs. The downside of that is those guys who come in limited work tend to show that explosive run. Once you start getting them more volume, often that explosive run kind of disappears.
It almost is feeling like the backfield for their opponent, the Cowboys, where we've had Pollard and Zeke. Zeke missed yesterday with injury, and Tony Pollard took advantage. Only had to carry it 14 times to get 131 yards and 3 touchdowns. Dennis, we've seemingly been talking for a couple of years that it could soon be Pollard time. Do you think he could be a feature back for Dallas next year?
I mean, if you take away that long run, it was only like 13 carries for 80 yards.
Only.
I was looking at that earlier today. Pollard's going to be an unrestricted free, or no, he's an unrestricted free agent after this year. He was not a first round pick. He's been there 4 years. He's going to want to go where he's almost guaranteed the starting gig. And Dallas, if they want to cut Zeke after this year, it's going to cost them $11.8 million. I don't think that, Jerry Jones doesn't have an issue eating the money. I just think Jerry Jones loves Zeke so much that I don't know if he can do it. Somebody's going to have to get in there and be the hatchet man and let Zeke go and re-sign Pollard. Pollard's going to go somewhere where they're going to give him starters money. He's probably looking at a 3-year contract, maybe 4, or 3-year with a couple void years added on to the end of it. But he wants to get paid. He's been a good soldier. And whether that's from Dallas, where he knows and is comfortable with the system, or whether it's a different team that is looking for a running back. The hard thing is that running backs are so devalued in the NFL, and there's a pretty good crop of running backs coming in next year's rookie class. So it's going to take a team owner that's like, I'm okay not getting one of these rookies. And there's several that I think would be in up for doing that. But Pollard looks great. I mean, he catches the ball well. He runs the ball well. He's explosive. I don't know if he's built for 25 touches a game, week after week after week. That takes a special player, but most teams don't. They don't feed a running back like that anyways anymore. So I don't know that even matters.
On to our next game. The Miami Dolphins traveled to Detroit and got the 31-27 victory over the Lions. Dennis, we saw Tyreek Hill again, 12 receptions, 188 yards on 14 targets. Jalen Waddle, 8 receptions, 106 yards, 2 touchdowns on 9 targets. With Tua in the lineup, are both those guys top 12 options every week?
Yeah. I mean, they're just so damn explosive. It doesn't, and we saw it with Drew Brees, who probably to me was one of the closest comps to Tua Tagovailoa. Just not a big arm, but very, very accurate. Not a tall player by any stretch. And Tua he puts the ball where the players can make a play after they catch it. And he's got two guys that are great at making plays after they catch it. And they can get deep when they take the occasional shot. And despite both of them being 5'11" or shorter, they both are ball hawks. When it goes up in the air, they can go get it, and they fight for it, and they'll take it away from you. So I don't have any issues with both of them being considered top 10, top 12 wide receivers.
On the flip side, for the Lions, they're now 1-6. Jared Goff has hardly been their only or biggest problem. But as the team creeps closer to the end of the season and possibly the top of the draft order, do you think it's possible the Lions will make a move for a franchise quarterback?
So, they fired their defensive backs coach today. So they're looking at the defense. The defense is stinky. They've got a couple guys over there, but they've got to figure it out. What are they going to do? I mean, the offense is adequate if the defense can keep them in games. We've seen the offense score into the 30s. I don't want to say with ease because it's
they've done it like 5 games. 5 of their 7 games.
So, they can score some points. We talked about it on Friday. The thing with Goff is you just got to keep pressure off him so that he can, be set. He's not a guy that can make things happen when people are falling at his feet. But the Lions have a good offensive line. They've got a couple good running backs, tight end, wide receiver. They've got some weapons on offense. Defense is their issue. That being said, if one of these top guys lands in your lap, as much as I think they should probably go defense, like if they finish number 2, I'm going to be, and they take Will Anderson, I'm going to be 100% okay with that. If they take Stroud or Bryce Young, I'm going to be okay with that too. But, that's not their weakness. Their weakness is defense. They need playmakers on defense. They need guys that can rush the quarterback. And if they want to win sooner, they need to take care of the defense. I mean, we've seen it in the NFL for years. It took Peyton Manning how many years to win a Super Bowl in Indianapolis because they spent all their money on offense and just used the we're going to outscore people method. And he wasted, in my opinion, they wasted a lot of real good opportunities to win multiple titles in Indianapolis because they didn't invest in defense. At least in New England with Brady was like, hey, we got to pay some defensive guys. We can score a lot of points, but, we play teams that can score a lot of points too. So it's, to me, they're going to have to, if they spend all their picks on defense next spring, I'm going to be okay with it. If they grab a franchise quarterback, I'm going to be okay with that too.
Yeah, I'm kind of in the same boat. I actually think Jared Goff's been pretty decent and would continue to be decent for them. Their biggest problem has been defense and also getting their playmakers to stay healthy. I mean, Swift makes a difference when you can keep him out there. Amon-Ra St. Brown makes a difference. We haven't even gotten to see Jameson Williams. We barely saw DJ Chark. I understand when you bought him out wanting to take one of those top 2 quarterbacks, but I don't think that solves all of Detroit's problems. On to our next game where the Arizona Cardinals went to Minnesota and fell short 26-34. It was pretty much what we expected from the fantasy performers. So I want to ask you about these teams in general. 3-5 now for the Cardinals, and we know in the past Cliff Kingsbury has struggled mightily with his teams on the back half of the season. Should his seat be getting pretty hot?
It should be. I suppose that the argument can be made, well, he didn't have DeAndre Hopkins for the first 6 games, and that is legit. And Hopkins has been legit since he came back. The dude is a baller. I have several shares in the redraft charity leagues I'm in, and I'm quite excited about the return of Nuke. That being said, they have historically faded in the back half of the season, and as we're turning the corner and heading there, I don't know that the old saying is a leopard doesn't change its spots, and I feel like we may be seeing the end of the Kingsbury era. We've seen a little bit of tension between him and Kyler on the sideline. And, while Kyler's putting up good fantasy stats, if you're not winning games, it's only going to get you so far.
His extension last year made no sense to me at the time and still doesn't. I think they're probably cruising for a change. On the flip side, the Vikings did make a coaching change. They're now 6-1. They have a 3.5 game lead on Green Bay in their own division, and they're looking to be in pretty good shape to get a top seed in the NFC. Should we start taking them seriously as Super Bowl contenders?
I think you can take them seriously as Super Bowl contenders. I do think it's going to be tough to get through Philly, though. And it looks like that's where the road to the Super Bowl is going, is through Philadelphia. Philadelphia went out. They got Robert Quinn. They've got Jalen Hurts, who's playing phenomenal, him and A.J. Brown. If Philadelphia stays healthy, I think it's going to be tough to get past them and get to the Super Bowl. Minnesota, with their weapons, has as good a chance as anybody, and their defense is playing pretty well also. So I'll be keeping my eye on it. If I was, off the top of my head right now, Minnesota might be the number 2 seed in the NFC.
They would be the number 2 seed if it started today, but I'd say Philly, Dallas, Minnesota, and San Francisco are starting to sort of separate themselves from the pack. I like the Giants, but I'm not sure they have the pieces to carry that out. On to a team that gave us perhaps the strangest performance of the day, and that's the Las Vegas Raiders, who traveled into New Orleans and lost 24-0. Dennis, Raiders coming off a bye, their offense just looked lost. We didn't get much of a performance from Adams, Jacobs, or Carr, and Hunter Renfrow seems to be kind of the lost man. What is going on with the Raiders?
Well, I'll tell you, my grandpa used to say, some days you eat the bear, and some days the bear eats you. And, well, the bear ate Las Vegas yesterday. They just couldn't do anything right. Did you hear that car go by?
Yeah. Well, when Carr throws it 26 times and only gets 101 passing yards, you kind of got to have a moment of pause, right?
Yeah, it's Jacobs didn't put up he put up okay numbers, 4.3 yards per carry, but they were behind and he didn't get any volume. He had 4 targets, caught 2 passes. But they had to feed Foster Moreau and Mac Hollins, wide receiver 1. I don't know, man. I think some of it is just maybe Josh Jacobs just needs to get his guys in there, and that's going to take a year or two. But it doesn't seem to, it's not going the way a lot of people expected.
It's going the way I expected. Josh McDaniels got his people in there. Jarrett Stidham threw the ball 13 times yesterday. On the flip side, Dennis, we've seen, Andy Dalton supplanted a healthy Jameis Winston this week, and the Saints offense actually looked good. He seems to have unlocked Kamara in a way that Winston wasn't really getting done. Should he remain the starting quarterback for New Orleans?
Yeah, I think so. He's playing well, and Chris Olave's playing well. Alvin Kamara's playing well. Juwan Johnson has turned into a legitimate threat from the tight end position. This kid, Shaheed, is putting up explosive plays. So, I don't think they have the depth to pull off any big move towards the playoffs. But they have the ability to put up a respectable record and then kind of move into salary cap hell. And Dalton, he does things. He's not the mad bomber like Jameis Winston is. He'll still put up a 3 or 4 interception stinker every now and again. But given the way that this team is built, I think right now he gives them a good opportunity to win. I don't think it's a better opportunity than Jameis. It's just a little bit different. It feels less risky is what it feels. And I don't know if that's good or bad. I think they've got 2 capable starters at this point, given the quarterback landscape in the NFL. But if it's working, stick with it.
Yeah, I do like Dalton's fit better a little bit for this offense. And crazy enough, 3-5, they are not out of their division race or the NFC race. AFC East battle is our next game up. The New England Patriots headed into New York, and even though I made comments about the Jets being home underdogs, they managed to lose and make me look stupid. Congratulations, New York. The Patriots won 22-17. Dennis, the Patriots offense remains a mystery week to week, but somehow they're still 4-4 and hanging around in that playoff race. Can they make it work with this offense?
For a playoff spot, sure. As a Super Bowl contender? No, they just have too many. I don't know if they don't have too many holes in the team. They have too many holes in the leadership of the team. I'm just not buying into.
They might have holes in the roster too.
Yeah, and they do, but I mean, this whole Matt Patricia, Joe Judge offense thing, and moving the quarterbacks around when one of them struggled. It's, I just, there's not good juju going around on the team. And we see it just about in every era. There's a great coach that the game just passes by. And Bill has been quite adept at being on the front edge and causing the other teams in the NFL to adapt. And it seems like he's trying to push everything back to the smash mouth offense kind of approach, and it's not working. And the other teams are, flying high and explosive, and Bill wants to grind it out with Stevenson and Harris. And I just don't think that I just don't think the philosophy's working. It'll be interesting to see what adjustments he makes in the off season. Does he bring back Charlie Weiss? I don't know, but Weiss was a pretty good offensive coordinator for him. I think
he's just playing out the string until he can get Josh McDaniels back.
Yeah. But no, I just think that the team is going to have some competitive games. They're going to have some stinkers that they don't play. They don't have an all-time kind of defensive roster to be able to cover up for the offensive shortcomings.
On the flip side, the Jets traded for James Robinson and then proceeded to run the ball 14 times with 3 running backs while they let Zach Wilson throw it 41 times. The beneficiary there was Garrett Wilson, who saw 7 targets, caught 6 of them for 115 yards. Do you like Garrett Wilson going forward? Is he starting to develop some chemistry with Zach?
I mean, Zach Wilson's a hot freaking mess. I get you believe that you can throw the ball, through a tornado or whatnot. But man, he gets to running around, and it's not like he has, Lamar Jackson, Kyler Murray mobility. He's got a little bit of athleticism. He doesn't have the type of size that, say, Josh Allen has. So when he's trying to run around, he can't just shake some of these people off. He needs to get the ball out. He's much more effective when he's not holding on to the ball. He's getting rid of it. My concern is that next week, Corey Davis could be back and he could get 11 targets and Garrett Wilson could get 3. I need to see more consistency with the players in that offense. Whether that's, a 60-40 split pass run, and we get a feel for who's going to get the touches on a consistent basis, who's going to get the opportunities. They've got some talented playmakers. They just don't know how to use them yet.
Yeah, well, we know who's not going to get the targets, and that's Elijah Moore.
Well, Jets. And the other thing I guess some of the defense that can be made, though, is their offensive line is a shambles. Yeah. They had some really good offensive linemen go down before the season started, and they've been trying to piece it together with the ghost of Dwayne Brown and some other guys. And while the effort's there, the ability isn't anymore. And I think that's hampering the development as well.
And so oddly enough, the Jets 5-3 on the season, 1-3 at home. All their losses at home. Next up is the battle for Pennsylvania as the Pittsburgh Steelers travel to play the Philadelphia Eagles, who won 35-13 to remain the league's only unbeaten team at 7-0. Dennis Najee Harris tried to do it all. He threw a pass for 4 yards. He got 8 carries, managed to turn that into 32 yards, and caught 6 passes for 26 yards. Still, what are we doing with Najee Harris? Running back 2, flex territory? He can't possibly be a top 12 option for you anymore, right?
Yeah, given where he was likely drafted, you pretty much probably have to start him unless you went robust running back and had a couple of your later wide receivers have popped off pretty good. Harris has some skill. The offensive line is bad. They're playing a rookie quarterback that maybe doesn't figure things out quite as quick as some of the veteran quarterbacks did. And he's not getting a ton of opportunity in the passing game. He did have 6 targets yesterday, which probably a season high, if I remember correctly. So the potential is there. A lot of it's going to come down to the growing pains that Kenny Pickett has to go through. But they're playing one of the best teams in the NFC in the Philadelphia Eagles. And the Eagles going out and getting Robert Quinn, their defense is only going to get better. Jalen Hurts is having a phenomenal year. The match with him and A.J. Brown, and while Devontae Smith didn't have a terrific game yesterday when it comes to fantasy production, what did he have? 5 catches for 23 yards. The running game is good in Philadelphia. They've got a really balanced team offensively and defensively. They're 8-0 for a reason. So I'm not going to read a whole lot into it. I don't think a lot of people, unless you're a diehard Steeler fan, you weren't expecting much in the way of a victory here yesterday. So you take your lumps, you move on. It's the first rebuilding season in Mike Tomlin's career, and they need to probably lean into it a little bit.
On the flip side, we mentioned the Eagles are 7-0, the NFL's only undefeated team, and we're about that time of year where the talk starts. Remaining schedule: at the Texans, home for the Commanders; at the Colts, home for the Packers; home for the Titans; at the Giants; at the Bears; at the Cowboys; home for the Saints; home for the Giants. Not a cupcake schedule with a couple of those teams, but not a murderer's row schedule either. So what are the chances the Eagles can go undefeated?
I mean, it's well within the range of outcomes. It's just so hard to do in a 17-game season, especially as it gets a little bit later in the year. Now, Philadelphia has an offense that if the passing game isn't working because of Hurts' ability to run, they can do some things on offense to manufacture a grind-it-out kind of game. The Bears traded away probably 2 of their 3 best players in the past week. So when they face them in week 15, it's going to be fairly easy. The Packers, the downside with the Packers is typically we would think, well, Aaron Rodgers is going to be able to get something done. I don't think this is the year Aaron Rodgers can pull a rabbit out of his hat. Houston, the Commanders, the Colts, the Titans, those should all be fairly easy victories. I think the Giants may give them some trouble, but in the end, I don't think the Giants have the wide receivers to be able to hang with Darius Slay and James Bradbury, and the same for the Saints. So if I were going to bet, if you gave me, the option is, 50-50, they do or they don't. I think there's more than a 50% chance that they can go undefeated the rest of the way. But it's, like I said, there seems to always be one weekend, and now a lot of that's going to be predicated on them staying healthy. But they have a good team.
The one I'm watching for is Dallas, which comes on the road at the end of 3 consecutive weeks on the road. And since they had an earlier bye, they would basically have to win 11 weeks in a row to finish undefeated, which is a tough stretch. I think they'll end up losing 1 or 2, but they're still going to be a high seed, and they're still going to be a hell of a team. The Tennessee Titans traveled to Houston and got a ho-hum 17-10 victory. Dennis, Derrick Henry and Dontrell Hilliard killed it on the ground, but most people were interested to see Malik Willis, who some had thought could be the number one quarterback taken in the draft. Didn't end up going till the third round. Made his first start, and you know what? Somebody said he looked like a rookie coming out of Liberty University, throwing 10 times, completing 6 for 55 yards and an interception, and rushing 5 times for 12 yards. What did you think of the Malik Willis experience?
Well, I don't think the Malik Willis era has started.
Yeah, I don't think Ryan Tannehill's sweating right now.
Right. It's players need to develop, and I get that he's got some exceptional traits. But when you play very low level competition that doesn't have the resources to put up complicated schemes against you, and you're clearly the best player on the field week after week after week after week, it takes a while for that to transition to the NFL. Here in Columbus, we hear all the time with the Buckeyes, everybody that comes into the Buckeyes was the star of their team. And some of them come here and they expect to be a big deal. And they're like, they don't even like Justin Zwick was I think the highest rated quarterback coming out the year he came to Ohio State. And he had to sit behind somebody. And then when it was his turn to take over, Troy Smith just outplayed him. Troy Smith came in as an athlete and a 3-star and just outplayed him and took the job. Zwick, to his credit, stayed, finished college, went on to a successful business career here locally, is involved in local media. Well, Malik Willis has the ability to do things that Justin Zwick couldn't. And so Malik now is in the NFL, but it's going to take some time. He's not ready. And the fact that Tennessee, I'm not saying Colt McCoy is your savior or Brandon Allen or, Chris Streveler or any of these guys, but all those people to me would have been better options than running Malik Willis out there yesterday.
I think they just wanted to see what they had, and they knew that the Texans couldn't stop a running back to save their lives, so they were going to be fine. On the flip side for the Texans, Dameon Pierce gets a receiving touchdown late in the fourth quarter to kind of salvage his day. But what is this team's offensive philosophy? They seemingly, in what was a pretty close game, went away from their best player, Dameon Pierce, only gets 15 carries. When they had the ball for turnover down around the 11, they didn't let Pierce touch it at all. What are they doing?
Sometimes coaches just outsmart themselves.
They have coaches in Houston?
Based on the production Pierce was putting up, they probably just didn't feel like they were going to be able to get it done against the Tennessee line. And so they were trying to throw the ball. 30 passes. So they only ran 48 plays on offense total because Derrick Henry was grinding up clock. So it was, while it seems a little bit unbalanced to me, the game just, sometimes the game script goes away that you just can't control it. And when you've got a person like Derrick Henry on the other side, he just can dominate the ball. And he did yesterday, 32. I mean, he had more carries than despite the fact we're like, wow, Houston was throwing the ball. He had more carries than Houston had pass attempts.
Houston's offense is a dumpster fire. Speaking of dumpster fires, the Los Angeles Rams returned from a bye and managed to soak up a 31-14.
Did they?
Yeah, not quite. Managed to soak up a 31-14 loss to the 49ers, who now swept the season series and moved to 4-4, vaulting ahead of them in the standings. Dennis, Christian McCaffrey, full week of practice turned out to be a good thing. He threw the ball once for 34 yards and a touchdown to Brandon Ayuk. He carried the ball 18 times for 94 yards and a touchdown of his own. And he also caught the ball 8 times for 55 yards and a gorgeous touchdown in the corner of the end zone. So is there anything Christian McCaffrey can't do?
On the way home, he rescued or turned over a bus and stopped and got all the people off safely, and then stopped to fill his car up with gas and delivered a baby in the parking lot to a woman that had went into labor early. So no, there is nothing that he cannot do.
He even managed to make Kyle Shanahan look like a real coach. On the I'm just kidding. Kyle Shanahan's okay. On the flip side, the Rams started.
He's no Nathaniel Hackett, though.
I never pretend he's a real coach, nor do I pretend Josh McDaniels is a coach. I would take Kyle Shanahan in a New York minute over Denver's options. The Rams didn't look terrible to start the game. We got a good old rushing touchdown from Matthew Stafford, which happens once in a blue moon. Even though he managed negative rushing yards on the day, still got that rushing TD for you. They managed to get a TD to Cooper Kupp, who also left with a little bit of an injury. Allen Robinson saw a few targets. Tyler Higbee dropped a few open balls. What do the Rams need to turn it around? I mean, Ronnie Rivers was their leading rusher yesterday, 8 carries for 21 yards. This seems like a grim sign.
They need to trade for David Montgomery.
I was thinking they need to trade for Kareem Hunt.
Yeah. Well, they have enough winnable games left that they could probably get to 9 wins, maybe 10 wins. I don't know if that's enough to get them in the playoffs, but they should be able to the way Tampa's playing, I think they're going to be in that one, and they have a good chance to win it. Same with Arizona, the Saints, the Chiefs. They're probably not going to win. Seahawks is going to be a winnable game. The Raiders are winnable. Packers, the Broncos. Chargers will probably be tough. Then the Seahawks again. So they can get to 9-ish. They pull 6 or 7 wins out of the last 9 games here. But they're starting to get a little. I don't know. The luster is worn off. Things aren't going quite the way they wanted them, and it comes down to Andrew Whitworth retiring. I think they lost another offensive lineman from last year. Their offensive line just isn't there. It's the same thing that's happening with Brady losing all of his interior line. If you don't have a good offensive line, you need to have a quarterback that can get out there and scoot. And despite rushing for a touchdown, Stafford's not that guy.
Yeah, next week's going to be fun. I'll call it the Depression Bowl as the Rams and Buccaneers battle each other. The loser might end up being a long shot for the playoffs. On to our next battle, which I like to call the Carson Wentz Bowl. Carson Wentz's current team, the Commanders, get the 17-16 win over his former team, the Colts. Dennis Taylor Heineke comes in, gets his second straight win, had a pretty good passing day, actually led the team in rushing. I call it the Carson Wentz Bowl. Are we going to see Carson Wentz back for the Commanders?
I think we are. To me, Wentz certainly has his shortcomings. Heineke does too. I mean, Heineke is dollar store Fitzmagic. I mean, that's his approach to things. He's a YOLO ball. John Hansen on Sirius XM calls him hospital ball Heineke because he's hanging his receivers out to get their heads knocked off. He's a guy you want to come in an emergency as your backup and get you through the game. He's not a guy you want to come in and start 6 or 7 games. He'll get exposed. He doesn't, he isn't taking that Geno Smith step. I just don't think he has that in him. I think that's what's going to lead to Wentz. But honestly, to me, I'd like to see him give a shot to Sam Howell and see. Speaking of seeing what you got, give Howell a shot. But they're 4-4, so theoretically they're competitive still and have an opportunity.
They're not out of it, and I think that's almost what it might take to see how. But I'm with you. We went through this with Heineke last year. For like first half of the season, you're like, oh, this could be their franchise quarterback, and then you watch the rest of the season play out, and you're like, nah, I'm good. On the flip side, the Colts wanted to see what they had in Sam Ellinger. What did you see?
I didn't see a lot of this game.
You saved yourself.
He got the ball to Pittman and Pierce. Seemed like he was willing to give them some opportunities. Pittman had 5 targets. Pierce had 9. Neither one of them put up a boatload of yards, but he was getting it to them. He seems like, he lost a fumble, low volume pass numbers. It just was, they're looking to put him in a position to not make mistakes. And I think that they're not going to give him a long leash to, go out there and be Taylor Heineke. They're playing to see, like, can this guy manage games and not fuck up? That's what we need. They're looking at it like going, we have enough pieces that we can maybe be competitive, but we just got to not screw it up. Can this guy not screw up? I don't think that that's the case. I think they need to go and probably get somebody else. But the Pickens are
see
slim.
what Foles has.
I don't. Foles ain't the guy.
Well, so I maintain, if the Colts keep saying they're still trying to compete this year, I don't think this was a move to compete this year. I get if you want to see what you have in Sam Ellinger if you're giving up, but I think it's very possible there's a whole regime change there in Indy. The New York Giants went into Seattle to play the first place Seahawks. Seahawks still in first place, come away with a 27-13 victory. Dennis, we've talked about it a few times. These Giants are plucky, but they're lacking in playmakers. And as much as you and I had hoped Kenny Golladay might be the guy, do the Giants need to try to get a wide receiver before the deadline if they want to make a run in the playoffs?
I think they do. If they could go out and get a guy, I know that Houston's like, we won't listen to anything that doesn't involve a second-round pick for Cooks. I get that.
It makes zero sense given the market.
Yeah, and so, if you can get a 4th or 5th for Cooks, you need to grab. I mean, he's 29, 30 years old now. It's not like his value is going to keep going up. And frankly, Houston, you haven't done a whole lot to boost his value either. To me, Wandale has potential. Slayton is, unless he takes some sort of massive step, he's kind of a one-trick pony. And he's got questionable hands. Marcus Johnson and David Sills, journeyman at best. Lawrence Cager, for God's sakes, got a target yesterday.
I know, he just moved from the Jets to the Giants for you.
Yeah, didn't even have to change apartments.
No.
They need passing weapons.
Which makes it ironic that they traded Kadarius Toney.
Sometimes things just don't work out. I think they're going to be plucky, maybe even make the playoffs. But I think Daboll's looking around and he's going, look, we're going to make whatever run we can. I'm going to motivate these guys, and maybe we perform, maybe we don't.
I feel like there's a lot of questions around the Giants. Like, I don't know how much they want to go all in on this year because that Golladay contract looks terrible. And both Jones and Barkley have their deals coming up at the end of this year. So it's fair to wonder, would they be leery of going all in with so many questions potentially about the big pieces on offense?
Yeah, I mean, the team is going to be different next year. The new GM, Daboll, they're going to go get their guys.
Before we get to the Seahawks, we got a question. What do you guys think about trading away Cook? I assume you mean Dalvin Cook, and Alvin Kamara for Adams, probably Devontae Adams and ATN, or even Cook and Madison for Adams. If it's redraft, if it's redraft, I'm not making that trade because I feel like Cook and Kamara are outscoring whatever's happening with Adams, and I'm with you. I don't trust ATN. I actually wouldn't do that in Dynasty or redraft.
Yeah, definitely a no in Dynasty. Well, in Dynasty, I guess if you've got Cook and Kamara and it's Dynasty, a 30-year-old wide receiver and an iffy run, I want at least a first-round pick in the mix there somewhere. Maybe a first and a second in the mix there somewhere. In redraft, if you think if you're really weak at wide receiver and you think Adams is the answer, I don't hate it. I just don't think that Adams in Las Vegas has shown us that he's the answer. I think you're going to need Cook and Kamara are playing well enough that you can aim higher than buying Adams, 2020 season.
Dennis, for the Seahawks, going into the season, Geno Smith, the starting quarterback, we kind of thought this was just a bridge or maybe a little bit of a joke, but he's looked pretty decent. This team's 5-3 and in first place. Could he actually be the long-term answer here in Seattle?
Define long-term.
3 to 5
he's 32 years old, is he? 31?
2 to 4 years.
He just turned 32. And there's a reason he only played 15 games in the last 6 seasons. I don't think he's your franchise quarterback. He is not your long-term answer. He is Cinderella's pumpkin carriage and midnight's coming. I like what Geno's doing, and I love the redemption story. It's great for this year, and I think you ride it for as much as you can get out of it this year. But if in Dynasty, as soon as you're out, you need to move him and get yourself a pick. In redraft, ride him till the wheels fall off, and because they invariably will with Geno.
Yeah.
I mean, there's too much history. But I mean, no, he's not the long-term answer.
I could see, though, given the quarterback market and where Seattle finds themselves, him being there for a couple more years.
He's a pleasant surprise.
Happy to help you there. On to our last game of the night, Sunday Night Football, where the Bills were 10.5-point favorites. And gosh,
I wish I'd have watched the Colts.
You wish you'd watch the Colts. Oh, no. I can't believe the Packers covered the spread here. But the Bills get the 27-17 win thanks to a kind of middling second half for Josh Allen, who threw 2 curious interceptions. But we'll start with the Packers first. Dennis, the Packers actually seem to get their offense going when they remembered that Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon are on their roster. Could focusing on the run game be the key to maybe a little bit of success in turning this around?
I mean, that's what us fantasy analysts have been pounding the table on all season long.
Seemingly, that's what Aaron Rodgers keeps saying he wants to.
So, they've got some receivers that can make some plays. And they just need to take the pressure off those receivers. And they have a tendency to call, they are calling too many pass plays. And that's putting the pressure on the receivers to carry the team, which is what Rodgers does as a quarterback. But that's not the strength of the team this year. The strength is Jones and Dillon. Yesterday, Dillon 5.4 yards a carry. Jones, I don't even know what it was. He had
7.2,
143 yards on 20 carries.
Yeah.
Jones also caught 4 passes. Dillon caught a pass. It's those guys need to get into that grinder mentality. They can wear teams down with those 2 running backs, and they've got a couple good tight ends they can add in there. I know Bakhtari wasn't healthy a lot of the season. Elgton Jenkins has been out, so they've had some offensive line issues. The defense plays hard. It's a pretty good defense. They can make some plays, but they've got to they need to find a way to let the receivers develop. They're force feeding it, and I get that that's what they may think they need, but man, they need to hammer it a little more and just grind those other teams down some.
Yeah, I mean, I've been saying for weeks, Aaron Jones is the best part of their team. They got to put the ball in his hands. On the flip side, it wasn't a great second half for Josh Allen, but the Bills are seemingly cruising now, 6-1. Is he a front runner for MVP? Is it kind of him and Jalen Hurts right now separating themselves?
I think so. I mean, it's a quarterback award, and
I mean,
so
you're not wrong.
He's having a phenomenal year. Hurts is too. Hurts has taken a massive step. The Bills, they're probably the best team in the league right now. Philadelphia is probably the second best. So as long as they keep executing, to be honest, when I watched the way they played yesterday, Devin Singletary looked phenomenal. I mean, I would have loved to have seen him get 20 carries. He got 14, but he was breaking off some big chunks of yardage. And it would have been a great game to just kind of see what he could do running the ball. I mean, the downside, I get it.
They're kind of getting a 1-2 punch with him and Cook, though.
Yeah, but both those guys are small, so I get the reluctance to give either one of them a ton of work. That, and then you've got Stephon Diggs and Gabe Davis and Isaiah McKenzie and Khalil Shakir and Dawson Knox to throw the ball to. So there's certainly some appeal there that teams like, say, the Packers don't have.
I don't know, Dennis. I'm starting to come back around that I was a year too early calling my Bills Cowboys Super Bowl. I want that 90s matchup. I know.
Yeah.
I see the expression. Well, tonight we will get an AFC North battle. The Bengals and the Browns should be kicking off here shortly. I took the Bengals. I think you did too when we previewed that on Friday.
We did.
But Matt and I presumably will be back on Wednesday looking at that game and looking ahead to Thursday Night Football, the epic battle between the powerhouse Philadelphia Eagles and the powerhouse Houston Texans. So if you have movie plans, or I will be at Universal Studios, I'm not going to feel too bad about missing that one.
Yeah, that may be a Gardner Minshew game.
God. All right, well, that's going to wrap it up for today because there's nowhere to go but up. But Dennis, what should the people do if they have a few moments?
Give us a rate and a review. Go out there on your favorite podcast platform, rate us, review us, subscribe, download, listen, don't listen. We just, honestly, we're just trying to get the numbers. We appreciate you. Thanks for listening.